If you new people want to, you can start showing up on Monday anytime you want to. For the time being, we'll go ahead and we'll meet on Tuesday, at which time I will continue to direct my comments and take into consideration I'm speaking directly to you. But if you don't come with some more people, that's probably going to be short-lived. But anyway, I've been meeting with the whole group besides on Friday on Monday, and you're welcome to show up same time from now on. Oh. In fact, some of the things I was talking about, again, with the other people I was going to use, and go ahead and drag in because it's all seamless. It's just tricks for it to appear to be otherwise because there is no beginning or end to it. But ignore that because that all it does is make your head spin. Now, if you're ordinary, it could do something else. You could figure, well, wait a minute, the guy didn't know what he's talking about. That's a shame that's not true. We could have all left. I could be living in the Keys by now and forgotten all this. I had a handful of things I've been talking about, and even with you people, but first a story, one of my new stories. It was a man once found himself in possession of a wondrous herd of beasts, and as he followed their movements, they took him to new and exciting locales. But then he began to have individual favorites in the herd, and the miraculous travels stopped. And see what else I can throw in. I'll get back to that in a minute. That and let's put this one in too, that to the same degree that you have a philosophy of life, you have no consciousness. And perhaps we'll get around to why people love. The ordinary mind loves stories, reports, but the whole idea of criminality and fools. But now let's start back with the mind itself. Oh, there was one other story. I'll go ahead and give you this one I just wrote yesterday. Once upon a time, a man found a miraculous cap. And he put it on, and it immediately, or eventually, changed everything in his head. But soon, he managed to forget that he was wearing it. As we like to do sometimes, I can always ask the rhetorical question, what in God's name does any of that stuff have to do with each other? And how in the world are you going to try and make it fit? That's one of the benefits of having worked in a sardine factory in early days. Well, it's not only that, we had some non-union people working there who, I don't know, who seemed to have disappeared. Their relatives showed up, but if you know what you're doing, you can make anything fit. I sincerely hope that you people don't eat sardines. Or if you do, I'll tell you the particular brand that you might care to avoid. Unless, of course, you also have a taste for cannibalism. And how about another one that I recently wrote? Pointed out that there were two kinds of meditation. One of them is the going off by yourself in seclusion and sitting kind. Another is the walking around every day kind. And one continues to be much more popular than the other. How's that? Should we put any more and try to make them all fit together? Back to the man with the herd and the man with the cap. They were actually the same person, now that I think about it. But all of the ideas about what this sort of activity is about is just so damn simple. It is so damn simple that it matches life, and it is so damn simple and blunt is why it must be put in the context of metaphors, allegories, and parables, which is another story. I might as well throw that in. That those who know must speak in metaphors, because if they did talk, those who know the secret must speak in metaphors, because if they described it simply and plainly, ordinary people would find it far too fantastic to ever believe. 2, 3. So you're supposed to think about that and think, well, wait a minute. Maybe you got the sentence mixed up. Because what could be more fantastic than allegories, parables? Well, like even my little story. Man finds himself in possession of a wondrous herd of unknown beasts. What the hell does that mean? When I say fantastic and unbelievable, you certainly don't take it to be literal fact. No one but the simple-minded, even in religious context, they do not take stories that a Buddha or Jesus or some Old Testament prophet would tell. Once upon a time there was a man who had 4 sons, and he starts a story, and it sounds all right, but then it gets into things that never happened. And only the extremely simple-minded ever take that to be literal. It doesn't belie the fact that they may attempt to still pursue some religion or swear allegiance to it, but they assume that once you start telling stories that have any action out of the ordinary, you just assume that there is some other message. And so at first you would think, well, they do the message because whatever the truth about life is, you just can't describe it. And so you have to put it in ordinary terms. You have to make up parables and stories about people finding a fantastic herd of animals, or a farmer did this and that and gave his son some money and all that story. And that sounds right. Whereas if you listen to my little story or my little news item, within that is a contradiction to it. That the reason people use metaphors, once they know what life's about, if they're going to speak about, the reason they use metaphors, because if they just went, okay, I'll tell you, it's blah, and they just told you, the sentence will make sense, believe me. I could make it make sense, a sentence. It wouldn't be fantastic. It would have nothing to do with flying saucers or Atlantis or gods. If I just said, I'll tell you the secret of life, I'll tell you what Buddha saw, I'll tell you what everybody saw, I'll tell you what it is. Very few words. I could give you 2 or 3, but I could give you a nice simple one, the sense will make sense, and you go, okay. But you know what your mind would do? Just the opposite of what you'd normally think, because your mind would assume that that was, even though I said, I'm going to tell you point blank, and I'd tell you, you would assume, well, that was a metaphor. And if I said, no, you weren't listening. It's not, for a change, it's not a story, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you and get it over with. Here it is. And if I insisted, you went, okay, all right, and you still heard it, you'd go, well, because you'd think, well, something's missing. Tell me more. And what you're saying is, we'll make up more stuff that sounds, kind of fantastic and unbelievable. Because, I'm not going to believe that. That can't be it. Where's the gods and the spirits and the cosmic forces and speaking to the dead or whatever the hell you used to like to believe in? Where's all of that? The herd, since I've been using the terms consciousness and the mind and the cap, how about this? A man's brain, very simply, is capable of 2 different things at the same time. And it's not our business to be concerned about ordinary life. I keep throwing in such as this to show you, not that I'm right and neurology is wrong, or that science and ordinary people do not know what they're doing. It's just that they're on a different track. But as far as neurology has gone now, and all the CAT scans and all the brain research they do, no one just comes up with an idea and has noticed. Or if they did, it's just a statistic somewhere. It's just something they observe. But the fact is, your brain can do 2 things at one time. People never take that into account. It is not on the basis that you can generally, for instance, in one part of your brain start running the multiplication table of 6 and then the other one do it of 13. But you can do this. You can be thinking a conversation. You can be thinking words about something you're going to do or something you just said, and at the same time, you can be singing a song, whether you got any talent, musically or not. That is, it's that kind of mechanical thing that you know the words of some song, and you do such as this. You do snatches. I'm using that because some of you may find it easier to observe if you try it in yourself. One of them is a bit more, is being operated a bit more by just wrote. That is, if a song, if you have any interest in music, let's use that because it is an easy one if this applies to you. I know that some people apparently never think in music, or it's the kind of people that in a club and the waiter drops a plate of dishes and you get them dance. That's no definition of somebody with no ear for music. And I know that there are people supposedly like that. But your brain, you can be talking to yourself. That is what you call thinking. That it's actually going on in words, something that you are saying to yourself, or thoughts you're having. And at the same time, your brain can be running a song. Maybe just one bar of the song, or two bars, just one or two lines, and it's going on. It's simply a fact. You can observe it if you want to. You can actually do it without a song, but it's got to be something fairly mechanical. It's got to be some kind of repetitious comment that you're making. Maybe it's something that you wish you had said to someone who insulted you yesterday. In other words, the same way as a melody, that some people, most of you had it, that people say a melody got stuck in my head. I went to bed and I had too much coffee. I was all excited, and the damn song just went on and on and on and on and on. Well, people actually do a bit of that without it being music. But the fact being this, that the mind, the brain itself, but the mind, since it put words on it, put words into the brain's operation, it's just one thing the brain's doing, but you can be talking about something to yourself. And at the same time that you're talking about what you're going to say to somebody, or what you did say, that you're actually in a conversation, that your brain is talking, your mind. And at the same time that's going on, your brain is singing, and it's almost background, but it is as operational, it is as real as what you seem to be thinking primarily. This is a fact. It's nothing new. It's not something new that man can do. It is the basis. Another way, if you want to look at it, is, again, proves nothing to ordinary people, but it is the original foundation for the idea of gods, the subconscious mind, obviously, but the whole idea that there are spirits in people, or things that may go on, are a subconscious mind. They can't even find the real mind. But see, that's always the way out with the ordinary mind. Is, well, we don't know, we can't understand at all what humans are about, so I know. Let's think up the idea of these invisible things. We'll call them gods, and they're the ones making us do what we do. And for thousands of years, and still, it has a great hold. Many people go, good. Nobody ever notices, not a slam on religion, but it's like saying, what will we call these things we stand on? And nobody knows. Why do we walk around? Nobody knows. And then somebody comes up with the idea, there's some kind of magnetic forces inside the planet, and they shift around, and it makes our feet go, even if we don't want to. Doesn't that make sense? Now, that sounds ridiculous, of course, you know. But it's the same thing that, well, my subconscious mind makes me think things I don't want to think. We'll get around, that's philosophy of life. It's an explanation. Besides the brain being able to do two things, I was going to give you the story of my man who found a miraculous cap, if we considered the good old brain, just the brain itself, because it does more things than think, as you obviously know. It squirts juices and produces electricity, makes your muscles move and tells you when you're hurt and hot and all that. But then the only thing that, or the thing of interest to humans, real up-to-date humans, is almost like a cap that is the mind itself. Now, what I'm going to say now is getting into the area of the real mystical and transcendental and all this kind of stuff. It belies there's no way to do it sequentially. But if you've got any ability to do this, you've got to be able to not just follow me, but you've got to be able to do this yourself finally. It just happens. There is no sequence to this. It does not make sequential sense. But, hey, screw it. You are conscious before you can think. But it's useless. The example I've tried to give you before, but I just didn't want you to choke on it, as a dog, you could say, has consciousness. But it has no mind, so it doesn't do it any good. You're conscious in here before you have a mind. But if you don't have a mind, you don't even have the word consciousness. You understand? I'm not playing with words, but it is non-sequential. Even that's not true, but what are you going to do? You're conscious before you know it. It is what I've tried to convey in the story that you've heard me tell I made up about everybody has this one chance where you come by the assembly line at some very early age, shortly after you're created, and it's you and life look right together. And it's like right before you get there where the light, where you and life, and when it get that one chance, it's like just before you get there. It's non-sequential, but go ahead, work with me. You get right here, and it's like you're conscious, let's say for a split second, just to put it in some temporal, sequential context, that you're conscious there just for a second. That is, you could be free of all the ills that humans claim they have, that we'll get to in a minute, why people like the idea of criminality and idiots as heroes. Maybe if we're lucky, I won't get to that. Many people find that no, they don't. It's like for a second, just before you get there, right, eyeball to eyeball, when life gives you that one glance of like quality control to make sure that you're going to be just at least middle class and ordinary. It's like just for a second you were conscious, and that, with none of the ills of humanity. We're not talking about physical ills, because you got that, you're going to die. We're talking about the ills that humans consider to be worthy of a human. You know, who cares about an ulcer or gout? And Jesus, you got to be real crude. You got to live in a trailer park to worry about. I got a blister. You know, I broke my ankle. It's nothing. You're not sophisticated. You got to have mental problems. Well, many people call them emotional problems, but they're human problems. They're all mental problems. Now, I mean, that's one way that you show nowadays your superiority to the people in the next trailer. Because they're just overweight and got psoriasis or something, and you say, you know, I used to just be like that, but I've been reading and I've decided I've got a subconscious trauma. And you have risen. You have risen in the trailer park ranks. That is, it's literal, it's not just a joke, that is literally true. That is the only ills, and it's nothing new, I don't mean it's new, but that is the only ills worthy of humans. That's the ones they write about. You go back thousands of years ago, beginning of literature, people didn't bother to write. People that kept diaries or describing what was going on with their kings and their priests. I mean, in some way in passing, they might say, well, the king got wounded with an arrow today, but that's it, 5 or 6 words. But the rest of the history of all of humanity are diaries or autobiographies. All the history is all the things plaguing my soul, which that's all they're talking about, is mental problems. And I'm saying it not in a psychiatric sense anymore, but mental problems, irritations, being disturbed, which is to simply say you're conscious at the ordinary level, that the mind just on a, as that great philosopher John Lee Hooker said, your mind is on a ramble. It was actually Howlin' Wolf said it first. It's just your mind goes on, and sometimes it's all right, and sometimes it's not. That if somebody jumped out and said, well, all right, we're going to play some kind of great new quiz game, and instead of it being a TV studio, it's here in real life, and you've been selected, you can have any wish you want, that old game. You know, what would your wish be? Now, if you were sophisticated at all right, they'll give you 2. Get rid of the first one so that you don't choke on that. I own all the money in the world. Okay, so we're through with that. You're rich. Then they say, now to the real thing. The real wish worthy of a human, what is it? And you know what's going to be after that. If you think for a second, it's going to be something having to do with changing your mind in some way. Change my mind, bring it under control, no matter what you say. You say, I wish I was smarter. You might say that if you were real dumb. I wish I was real smarter. I mean real dumb in the sense you don't even know. That is, you're just walking around intelligent. You might say, I want to be smarter, but the thing is, you would use your real human wish. The first one you dispense with. I want all the money in the world. I want a closet that produces $100 bills every time I open it. The genie knew that. I knew that. You knew that. So we got rid of that. But then that's a real great wish. That's a wish worthy of a beaver or hippopotamus. But I should really say a squirrel so that you understand it. All it is a nesting instinct. It's the only reason you got savings account. It's just a holdover. It's still part of your squirrel personality. It's part of your squirrel genetics. So back to the wish. All I wanted you to see was the wish that was actually worthy of a human would have something to do with your mind. That's all it would be, because that is the only problem men have. you do have the problem to stay alive, but the situation in which we all live, that's not even a problem. If you can't stay alive, you can stay alive in our day and time without even working. I mean, to die like of starvation, for you to think that the problem is some way physical, other than the fact you may be sick. Some of you could have a deadly disease. I already pointed out you're dying, so skip that one too. I mean, there's nothing to be said about that. But the rest of it, you've got no physical problem other than death. You don't have a physical problem like saying, well, I can't stay alive. I can't find enough to eat. In our day and time, if you can't find enough to eat, then food's not your problem, idiocy is. I mean, you're not going to die. You may die, but it's not going to be of hunger. You're going to die of stupidity first. So I'm just trying to make the point. There is no problem enough for a human. Whatever you come to is going to be here. No matter what you call it, no matter how you describe it, to use your one wish, the real wish, the human wish, after you got the magical closet that produces money. What you want is the genie to do something with that. And what is it you want? No matter what you call it, it would come down. I could get any ordinary human to, if I said, all right, what you'd like to do is be able to have absolute control over your mind. Would you accept that? And humans, I might have to change the word once or twice or converse with them 30 or 40 seconds and go, okay, yeah. If I could just, when things get on my mind that bother me, if I could go away, and they'd go away. That's okay. That's what you want. Yes, it is. Do you understand that's all the enlightenment is in one sense? That's all the whole position of humanity as a whole, the whole herd of humanity moving, we'll assume, you can take I'm not misleading, you do not make a mistake, you can look around, that things are progressing nicely. Humanity as a whole, getting healthier, living longer, everything seems to be going okay. Individually, people are still irritated. People are still dissatisfied. The dissatisfaction is that consciousness can be one thing, and it's not. And humans don't even know it, ordinary people. The people ends up in this sort of thing, they always have suspected it, and sure enough, somebody, way back somewhere, the very first mystic made up this whole stuff. Once he had that kind of experience, he went, that's it. He didn't have anybody to say it to, and he didn't actually say that's it. I just ad-libbed that for him, since he's not here. But here's what has happened. Here is what happens when you see what's going on in life. Again, it's non-sequential, but it's almost like going back to where you were coming right before life, before you had a mind. It's not sequential, I repeat, but it's the basis of all of the ideas of humans, even those who consider themselves philosophers, especially religious thinkers. It is always the idea that we should go backwards. Even the idea that if you had some sort of mystical experience, or if indeed you had a great religious mystical experience, or if indeed you in some way reached a higher plateau that you could in some way return to union with Allah, all the descriptions is a return to. It's always a return to, back to the garden, back to God, back to better days. It's not really that, but there is validity to it. That is why humans feel that way. You can't, if you strip off this, which you can do, it happens to people accidentally. Head traumas. Like I said, you can do it to yourself with a tack hammer and a Phillips screwdriver up in your nose. You can take the mind out. That's not the problem. You're just going, pow. It's cheaper than a frontal lobotomy. But it will not make you more conscious. It will put you back at the level of, if you're lucky, if you hit it in just the right spot, you'll be back maybe as conscious as a hippopotamus. But it's very tricky. It's very likely you're going to drop below even that level. So the thing is, to get the mind shut off is not the trick. I might also point out that much of the so-called hobbies and recreational drugs and alcohol in life is an attempt, not enough to be fatal to the mind, but it's an attempt that you're trying to suppress the mind. And I was going to get through the fascination with news and entertainment to criminals and those outside the mainstream of life, and even idiots, kind of stupid savants, the people who seem to be the fools of life. At any rate, what you're trying to do, what the experience is, it is a kind of consciousness without the comment of the mind. It is not a killing of the mind. Those who have never experienced it, they buy into the descriptions, and the descriptions are, as far as words go, of such things as the Far Eastern, like the Zen schools. The idea of meditation, that you're going to sit, and if you're lucky, and if they give you a koan or a mantra, they do something there. They just tell you to concentrate on an imaginary spot here in the middle of your head, just something to get your mind to do. Ordinary people always take it very seriously, and they say, well, let me write this down, you know. What am I? And you say, well, here's your secret word. Of course, the people doing it now, they take it seriously. I don't mean they're putting you on. If you go now and you find somebody that's supposedly teaching forms of yoga in the meditative sense, or Zen or whatever, and they say, oh, here it is. We're going to give you a word, and when you sit and meditate, always chant that word. And they even make big deals out of it. They have for thousands of years. I know that there's groups doing it now, that you have to go through some procedure and pay $2,000 or $3,000, or be there several years, and you see a head guy, or the head representative of the southeastern region of the, you know, whoever it is, and he takes you alone. He says, all right, your secret word, your mantra is so-and-so. I understand all that. It's a nice hobby. That's all it is, because the word could be peanut butter. The point is for you to try and work and to hold the mind on something. Back to the point, is they try to describe it, for instance, as, well, if you sit there, if you strive for Buddhahood, if you try to calm the mind, the whole point is to calm the mind. And one of the great old allegories is that it's like a wavy mirror that's always busy, and it's got that if you ever calm the mind, if you sit there long enough and you concentrate on your mantra or the koan, you try to answer the unanswerable question, and you do it, if you're lucky, if Buddha smiles upon you, if fate is kind to you when it happens, the enlightenment is that the mind suddenly, all the ripples, all the unevenness, all the agitation ceases, and it is like a perfect mirror suddenly. And all it does, it doesn't give you anything new. This is one of the old descriptions. All it does is suddenly give you a perfect reflection of life, which I'm hard-pressed to beat it. But humans then, ordinary people that do it, they think, well, that is the point. You know, what it's going to do is in some way take the mind and go, and if you describe it to people, as I said correctly, even ordinary people that found a genie that would give them their wish, they'd say, yeah, I'll take that. Of course, ordinary people would probably say, well, I'd just like to have control to, I could do that and then not do it if they had their wits about them, which they wouldn't, come to think about it. But if they did, they'd say, well, I'd like to where I had some control, because if they had their wits about them, they'd think, wait a minute, that means I'd be calm and nice and still forever. You know, I enjoy being pissed sometimes. And so if they thought fast enough, they'd say, all right, don't just calm my mind. Don't give me the Buddhahood of the mind. Would you give me the power to turn it on and off? That'd be their wish. If they had any quick, if you said, hurry up, you know, the genie said, I'm in a hurry. But if they could think fast, and they started to say, all right, I'll take that Buddhahood thing about the mind just being calm and being a perfect reflection of life, to where I did not add to it, I did not see distortions, I wasn't run by opinion and belief and all kinds of half-ass notions, that my mind simply, it was now not a chatterbox telling me, well, you should, you know, do this or you should think that. That the damn thing, I love this, I'm talking for the ordinary person, I love it, it just stopped. And it didn't add anything. It no longer colors my opinion of life. It's not like glasses I see through that distort and make it look like a fun house. I like the description. It just suddenly is a perfect mirror, and all it does is perfectly mirror, now a verb instead of a noun, to perfectly mirror life. I'll take it. As I said, if they had their wits, they'd go, wait a minute, can you make it to where I can cut it on and off? Just, you know, just in case. Because who wants to be, if an ordinary person, as I said, could think, I assume you got the point. But an ordinary person, if he could think real quick, he'd think, wait a minute, I don't want to be that nice and decent and calm forever. I mean, what will I do on the weekend? What'll happen if I go down, you know, to my favorite bar down at Al's Black and Blue room? You know, a lot of times I can't pick up a woman. I enjoy, you know, a little, you know. Plus, you know, my brother-in-law, I don't like him. I don't want to like him. I don't want my mind to be so calm that I do like him. I like not liking him. He deserves not to be liked. All right, my story about the guy that found the miraculous hat. It's like remember the story, he put the hat on. Now look at it as being conscious, because we all start out, if we are genetically sound, just ordinary people. You have the potential for consciousness. It's just there in the brain. But consciousness is not set alive. And these are just words. I could call it something else, but I'm just using ordinary words, until you can speak, which is why humans cannot remember anything other than people that like to talk to mystics on the telephone and say they remember being in the womb. They don't remember being in the womb. The mind only remembers back to the point that the mind started talking, that your consciousness put on the hat. Of course, kids don't go around and find a miraculous hat, but that's what happens. Is the potential for consciousness is what am I going to translate my own stories? Why not? The miraculous hat is like you put verbiage on. You put the mind on consciousness. You put the mind on the brain. The brain is not all that complex. As soon as you learn to talk, that's when your memory, ordinary memory, starts. By the way, always truth in advertising. I don't mean that you cannot remember things past when you learn to talk, because genes have a memory, the genetic network. But what I'm saying is the kind of people you see on TV or write books and say that, yes, they remember being in the womb, they do not. Like always, those that know how to do it, they don't go around talking about it. It's not you remembering the womb, but just to make it. The memory of life is there. That's the only reason this kind of stuff survives, because it's not taught like people used to like to believe. What many people still do, that yes, I'm a student, a personal student of Swami so-and-so. I studied with him the last 2 years just before he died. May have, but that's not the way it works. Back to your mind, what you call ordinary consciousness, your mind, your memory of you being alive only starts at the very earliest, the day you said, Mama, or Dada, or Doo-doo, whatever you said, is when you talked. When the mind started, when you put on that cap, that's when the miraculous thing happened, that the hat, in my story, that the guy put on, changed everything in his head. It changed the whole situation. You were no longer just a little mushy brain in there, firing off juices and electricity. It started doing something else. The brain became a mind. But when it became a mind, then the potential, I'm just calling consciousness for the time being, then that, if it had some other potential, what you got to understand is my story does fit. It's like you put a cap on it. You had no choice. It's not that man made a mistake. But I point out again, as always, the myths, the religious stories of creation, etc., all fit again because all over the world, ordinary people believe that in some way, if they're sophisticated at all intellectually, everyone will accept the story from either from mythology, from religious myths, or they'll take it as history, that in some way, somewhere, man ran amok. Any sane person on this planet, they will accept it immediately. Yeah, I don't know what. If they're not religious, they say, well, I don't buy all the stories, but you say, well, something's wrong. And they'll go, yeah. I mean, even atheists. And that's kind of, I used to know, heard a guy that said that it broke his heart that he finally got shed of his father's religion. It drove him crazy, and he finally grew up, went to college, or smoked enough dope, and finally got over feeling guilty about that and became an atheist. And said one day, somebody asked him, he said, well, do you feel any better about life? And he went, well, no. You didn't follow that? It's got nothing to do with religion, but anyway, kind of pissed him off at a second level. He went to all that trouble to get over worrying about religion. He didn't have to go, and he didn't feel guilty about doing stuff, and he could, screw his neighbor's wife and envy his neighbor's oxen and tell lies and bear false witness, do all the naughty things, and he didn't care anymore. And the person said, God, that's great. So, in other words, you in life just fine. Everything's great. And he thought, boy, I wish you hadn't asked that. Went to all the trouble to be an atheist, and I'm still kind of ratted off about life. And I don't know why, but never mind. You put on the hat, you begin to speak, you become a human. If you never put on the hat, you're not even human until you begin to talk. The trick is to take off the hat. It's not to, when they describe still the mind, as I said, is not a bad description, but to try and think about it is that is the end of it, that is the goal, that suddenly you go blank. Now you've got to know that something is amiss there. People who dream of the kind of enlightenment, etc., they will accept that. They can take that as the last page in some brochure or a tract or a book, and suddenly the man, after years, goes on for hundreds of pages of how he got there, and suddenly it hit him and his mind went blank. Thank you, the end of book. And people accept that, like in the same way that they would accept it, as I was trying to show you, an ordinary person, as a description of what it would be to be cured of your intellectual, of your mental ills. That the mind would just leave me alone. what happens, I'm going ahead and tell you, is you can be conscious, and it's not like the mind stopping. I'm not saying that the description is totally incorrect, but you can be conscious without comment. And what you do, and the reason I brought up the idea, the reality of the fact that your brain right now can do two different things, just people out in the street. You can be conscious, your mind can still be working, but your consciousness is not tied to it. That is what the experience is. And all the ideas that people believe, well, the enlightenment, you see God. That's child's play. That's nothing. That's a metaphor. You don't know what astounding is. But they keep thinking, well, it's something you see. Well, you could say that, but you know what it is you really see? How about this? It's almost like you put, I hate to do this, but I will. It's almost like you put another cap on. But it's a cap on top of the other cap. You can't take off the first cap. That's the mind. That's whoever you are now. But it's like a cap on top of it. And you can't take off the other cap. That's not the problem. But now there's something that is not involved with it. Conditionally speaking. You're still conscious in your own head. Your brain's still in there. Your nose is still the same size it was. If you're tone deaf, you still can't play guitar. But what you see is, the miraculous thing you see is, should I tell them? Yeah, it doesn't matter. The miraculous thing you see is, you don't see God, you don't see suddenly in some way Atlantis rise from the Atlantic, or flying saucers come to your backyard, or little people from the center of the earth, or Buddha show up. You can do that on drugs. Here's what you see miraculously, is in the privacy or privacy of your own head. You suddenly see your mind working. And you're not it. You are not that wondrous herd in which you find yourself possession. You're not the herd. The herd's still there. But once you're conscious above that level, you have no preference. That's what'll drive you crazy. That's what'll keep you sane, or drive you crazy according to which way you want to go with it. Is as long as you are that cap, there is no way out. You can read forever, you can talk to yourself forever, you can dream forever, that I'm going to affect what I think. Sure you are. Now I am. I'm going to work on it. Go right ahead. Hey, work on it. I'm going to straighten out that herd of unruly horses, or whatever they are. Bad horses, bad horses. Some of them are pretty good, but some of them are just absolutely out of control. Well, plus some of them are ugly. Some of them, I always preferred Jewish horses, and I'm going to tell you, there's some Islamic horses in there. I grew up around an Irish herd, and by God, there's some British horses in there. There's some green horses, not like red horses. You can do anything you want to. A philosophy of life. See if we can put them all together. If you got a philosophy of life, to the same degree that you've got one, you got no consciousness. And now I'm now speaking of consciousness in this sort of sense. To the same degree that you've got a philosophy of life, you're not even using the intellect. You're not even using it. And yet everything about the intellect is everyone looking for a hat that they find to be comfortable, that you can start talking about. I'm going to shift a minute and make it sound like, it sounds like I'm talking about thinking in the mind now, not the consciousness, not the experience of being more conscious. So be it. That's what it's going to sound like for a minute. But you're not even using the mind, which will keep you from ever experiencing anything else until you find out what thinking is about inside of your head, not out of a book, not out of a book from a med school, not a medical textbook, or not a philosophical book, not a metaphysical book. That's only ordinary people that will go study human nature by enrolling in college and paying those good lab fees to help pay for the mice that they observe. Don't ever ask yourself, why am I here? I wanted to study humanity, so I decided I'd be a psychologist. You look around the labs, they never have humans there to study. They got mice, monkeys, There's nowhere to go. But until you understand what thinking is, until you see what the purpose is, you cannot rise above it. You cannot get free from it. You cannot do anything with it. You can believe you can, which is why people pursue education many times, but it's like there you sit with a table full of Play-Doh and you're not satisfied with it. And after years of study, considerable tuition, it's like you take some of the dough and you slide it over to the other end of the table. And if you're really good, perhaps they'll give you a degree you can put on the wall. Bachelor, or perhaps even master of dough sliding. I know they call it other things, but then maybe if that still doesn't satisfy you, maybe you will go ahead and go into, after the bachelor, go into graduate work and learn to, shove it up to the other corner up there. Maybe even a place you'd never imagined, right up to the edge. Well, that's being a psychiatrist, I guess. You can move it around, but it does not change anything. It does not change so-called consciousness. It does not change a man's understanding. It's just a known fact. People with ordinary mind cannot dwell on it. But any psychiatrist who's still sane, we won't go into that, or any theologian, anybody, no matter what education, if you say, do you actually? Now, I know that you're a psychologist. You're a doctor of psychology. I know that's supposed to be, that's the whole idea, the whole area is to study humans, the human mind, the human psychology. I know all that. But tell me the truth. Do you actually understand any more, say about you? Do you understand more about the purpose of life than you did when you enrolled in freshman class 20 years ago? And it's a simple answer. No, I don't. I learned a whole bunch of interesting things. I make a living at it, and there's a lot of good speculation, and I can play mind games with myself, and I can read other people's articles and think, well, what if that is true? But if you say, but do you understand any more? Or that you're a doctor of theology. You've been a priest. You've been a rabbi for 30 years. Do you actually? Now, don't quote me anything from the book, the Bible. Do you understand any more? Don't tell me what God said, Allah said. Do you personally? Just tell me. I mean, if this was a friend of yours, so it wouldn't sound like an accusation, because then he wouldn't answer. He couldn't. But you understand what I'm getting at. If he was still sane at all, and you get him under sort of objective circumstances, and said, do you understand any more after being a priest, dealing with the foibles, the ins and outs and the intricacies of the human soul and spirit and mind and all that? Do you understand any more after being a priest, day in and day out for 30 years, than you did when you started? The answer is no. But why do people have a philosophy of life? It's so that he could get out of that and go, well, but wait a minute. Now, maybe I don't understand it, but now look right here in Isaiah somewhere, look in the Quran here, chapter so-and-so, where Allah said so-and-so. And that's supposed to be the end of it. And if it's not you making reference, obviously or visibly, to another book, a holy book, you got your own holy book. You can be an atheist. I got news for you, friends and neighbors. You got a holy book, and plus you got one as crude as the Old Testament. You got one as crude as the old papyrus writings of the ideas of mystery schools back in Egypt, things that you just think, boy, were they simplistic dolts back then. I mean, bless their little hearts, but we've made great strides now. Yeah, that's right. You got your mind. Hey, I'm an atheist. I'm a humanist. I've got degrees. I'm not religious. No offense to religious people, but I take a kind of cold, clinical view of life. I am always on the alert to study what's going on, to make my own judgments. That's real good. Man's clutching this little worn-out, cheap Bible, in the sense of a big B, or Vedi Mekam, his own little holy book. He listens to this. If you've got a philosophy of life, to whatever degree, at any second, that is, you're listening to your mind, you are not conscious. That is an equation. It is a mathematical fact. No one wants to hear it. Well, it doesn't do them any good. I don't mean it's something that I would tell people, and they go, oh, no, don't do it. They just hear it and go, or just walk off. Because the mind is just one of the things the mind cannot deal with. It's not equipped to deal with at the ordinary level. But a philosophy of life, let me also point out the difficulty. We're not talking about just people out in their relationship to human institutions. Consider what it is within yourself of trying to do such as this. Because people want a philosophy of what it is. They will go, all right, listen, I've been listening to you talk. Now, what is this? And I say, oh, all right, I'll tell you, it's a hybrid. There's a name for it. We call it Panigna. It's a combination of some of the later day Buddhist Zen ideas and some of the more physical aspects of yoga, and I put it all together. But it's a whole new thing, and people have been working on it. It's been a group of people for about 150 years, and I'm the guy they sent out. And this is what we call it. I know I make it sound silly, but you would feel like you'd made a little progress. You feel like, well, good, so we got that out of the way. You know, all right, I can accept that. I'll go with that. I repeat, to the same degree you got a philosophy of life, you're not conscious. Now, people ordinarily think of philosophy of life as being a hyphenated or a term within quotation marks, a philosophy of life. Like, yes, I'm a Presbyterian, or yes, I am, if I'm more secular, I am a free market, Republican humanist. That's my philosophy of life, which would make that sound up to date. To the same degree you get our philosophy of life, it does not have to be some big structure that you say, well, I'm a member here, I got a card, I belong to the American Humanist Society, I belong to the Republican Party. You don't have to do that. You have a philosophy of life if you're living by what your mind says. If you're living by words, which, and if you tell the mind that, again, it's not that the mind will go, ah, you know, how shocking for you to tell me that. You tell the mind that, and the mind will think about it and go, well. Of course, after that, I've written several little stories about then the guy who told him that. The mystic walks off, and the guy says, wait a minute, don't you want to hear what I think about it? The mystic don't have to. Of course, we're not talking about a struggle between you and a mystic. You don't have to. When you hear me say that to the same degree you think about what's going on, then you're not conscious. To that same degree right then, and your mind goes, well, wait a minute. And you say, well, don't you want to hear what I have to say about it? I don't have to. You've already said it. It is, what's the mind going to do with that, though? If you were fairly well-read, I guess, you could say, wait a minute, you are playing some kind of damn reheated Zen game or something. You're just playing with words. Yeah, right. What do you think the mind lives on? I don't know. I'll think about it. Well, you do that. Okay. Anyway, back to what I was trying to show you, and I'm not talking about me and you. And I'm not talking about you and any group you ever found. I'm talking about inside your own nervous system. Inside of that. If there's no philosophy to it, your mind just, it doesn't know where to stand. It doesn't know where to start. Good. Think how lazy that son of a bitch is. I always like ordinary people, though. They'll say, I'm not lazy. My mind's always active. True. If you're alive, what have we said to say, my mind's always active? Well, let's see. What have we said by saying that? We've said that you are breathing. We're saying that you are not yet ready to be buried. We're saying that we can't get anybody this side of the death doctor to proclaim that you're not viable. That's all you're saying. To say, well, my mind's always active. I know it is. That's the only way that you're humanly alive at that level. Every philosophy of life, even if it's down to a word, is a replacement of a place where a man has the possibility to be conscious, or to make it sound a little more attractive, to be more conscious, to have his consciousness awakened to a new level. That every word you use is a philosophy of life. And the mind will argue with that forever. Or even if somebody's mind will say, well, wait a minute, that may have some validity. I'll admit there might be something to what you're saying. But, that is, what they want to do is start culling the herd. They want to say, well, now you're probably talking about some ideas. I've had my eye on some of these ideas that run through my mind. I don't like them. So I'll agree with that. There are probably some things I think, not only do I not like, in all humility, I've got to admit there are probably some ideas I have that are less than well-founded. And that's a kind of sign of real intelligence out in the city, is to just be slightly humble and say, I might be a little stupid. You know, that's a sign you're saying is, oh yeah, I don't know everything. I have a PhD in philosophy, or I have a MD in psychiatry. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know everything. That's a sign of sanity. But if it is, how come they don't carry it further? That is to admit a little stupidity Of course, in a religious sense, it's to show your humility and to show that you're under the kind of guidance of God and the greater forces, but even intellectually. In a secular sense, it is an admission of some stupidity that shows you're sane and in fact passes at a cocktail party level as even strong evidence of your superior intelligence, that you can stand there and admit, well, hey, I don't know everything. You're a psychiatrist and you made some little comment and some woman comes up or some guy, a waiter, just had a few drinks back in the kitchen and he hears what you said and he makes some comment like, wait a minute, I got an uncle that had the same problem. He did so-and-so. In other words, he denies what you said. And you kind of chuckle, and you and the other high-class, educated people, as the waiter kind of straggles off, and they look at you like maybe they're trying to be embarrassed for you, and you go, well, you know, we should not laugh out of the mouths of babes and et cetera, because, hey, even though I am Dr. You-know-who, hey, I don't know everything. And they all nod like, well, isn't that just like him? Isn't that just like superior intellects to admit that even a waiter, a man that probably didn't finish high school, might have some observation that was superior to his. All right? We all know that, but what you never think is, if that's a sign of intelligence, how come they don't finally say, I don't know nothing? You know why? Because I'd be getting too close to enlightenment. That if you could actually be stupid, I don't guess I get around to criminals and the kind of movies and entertainment that people's always liked the idea of idiots. Well, idiots, savants especially, but that there's something in idiocy. A philosophy of life, and it is the reason I'm stressing it with you, because I would assume, or let's assume, that none of you are religious fanatics or fanatics of any kind right now. But you end up being a fanatic, or you want to be a fanatic, like using that word, about pursuing such as this. And it's always the idea, well, just be a little more specific about it, damn it. You know, I'm sold on it. Just tell me, what is it? Give me a name, what is it? And that's simply the mind. It's not your stupidity. It's the mind saying, well, what is it? And if somebody knew what they were doing, it's like playing some kind of game almost to get a fish in, but the fish have got to participate. You can't do this and go out in the street and hook people in. They've got to come out of their own volition, so to speak. But then it's like, they go, yeah, this is it. You know, as soon as I heard you talk, I knew it was it. So, you know, all right, what is it? You know, skip this new intelligence stuff. You know, what is it? And it's kind of, you start reeling. You say, well, it's kind of like this. And you let them go. And they keep on, well, just tell me something. You know, part of my job, for anybody who's actually interested in this, is not to tell you anything. It's to tell you just enough that makes you keep going, yeah. And then it's like, well, he took it away. He talked for like 55 minutes, and I thought he was about to say something. It was like the last 2 or 3 minutes, in case you hadn't caught on what I do. And I must say, I'm pretty good at it. Just the last couple of minutes, I can suddenly go and pull it all apart. But I do it for your benefit, because I don't just leave thinking, well, now I'm getting somewhere. No. That's a philosophy of life. But understand, again, let me repeat, I am not actually talking. The point is not you and me. That's not it. I just use that. Think about it, in your own nervous system, what you think of it now is your mind or your consciousness. It keeps on, no, well, God, I like this. Tell me more, give me more. What you really want is less. Because what you want is freedom from this, which is the mind. It has all kinds of great uses, but it will not become more conscious. It is as conscious as it will ever get. It knows everything that it will ever know. And yours is the level at which your mind operates. Your level of understanding at the ordinary mental level is not that far removed, either up or down, from everybody on this planet. That's why I keep using about a parade and a common level of consciousness. There is. It is extraordinary to know anything beyond that. You can learn all kinds of facts. You can get a degree. You can move the Play-Doh around on the table and make other kids go, wow, how'd you do that? But if you got any sense, you know, well, I don't know any more than I did. I got a degree and I make a living. It's better than laying brick. I'm glad I'm a psychiatrist, because my back was going to give me problems back when I was in the building trade, so I'm glad I finished school. Okay, fine. But if you got any sense, you know that you don't understand any more than you did, and you never will. That's the mind. A philosophy of life also does not exclude education when I speak about it. It's everything that the mind does. It is that cap you put on and it starts what appears to be the education of the human. that you're a little kid and your parents start teaching you to talk. It's everything the mind learns. It's very quickly, in case you hadn't noticed yourself, everything that you really know that is operational, besides the multiplication tables or whatever specific job you have, just the mental part of being a human, 12 or 13, you got it. You don't change that much. Is why you have all over the world that these ideas of bar mitzvah and coming of age, and little boys become men, and now little women become, of course that's unfair, little women are born women. It's only men that think we have to go through a procedure. and looking at women thinking, well, I wonder if women, us men, here we are at 12 years old, and the big guys took me out and beat me up in the woods and, cut off part of my pecker or whatever they do to show, and, painted your face that now you're a real man. You think, boy, poor little girls. And when do they become women? If you ever think that just shows that them cutting off part of your pecker and painting your face didn't make you become any smarter. That was a little side humor. Women are born grown up in the area that matters, hormonally. At any rate, things are changing. I know. Your mind, as far as, like I said, besides the random statistic and the kind of information that you got to know how to drive a bus or to be an accountant, but 12 or 13 is why it appears to be that people came of age. Men, they were considered, that was what society seemed to depend on, is them being able to get out and keep the family alive. But what you knew that made you a human socially, your ideas about what life was about, 12, 13, that's about it. And if you don't know that, you just never thought about it. And if you don't know that and you have thought about it, then hope for you grows slimmer and dimmer. You're just not that much different. You're what ordinary people, they'd call it your personality. How about that? Now, it shouldn't be a secret that you could see somebody now, if you've got any intelligence at all, any wits about you, could maybe somebody you live next door to, some other guy. I'll use it guys, girls could do it too, but some guy you hadn't seen since the age of 12, they moved away. Age of 12, and if he was walking down the street now, and you had your wits about you at all, and you looked around, you could see this guy, and we're talking about 20, 30 years later, and you hadn't seen him since the age of 12, and just you could see him just walk. You wouldn't know why. You see him at an angle, and you'd think, if you had your wits at all, and your memory was good, you'd go, I'll be goddamn. And sure enough, it would be the guy that last time you saw him was 12, because that's about it. In his personality, you can see in his muscles, you can see in his stance, you can see in his walk. That was it. Up here, he could now have a PhD. He could know all kinds of information. He could be a neurologist. He could be an atomic physicist. But you look at him, and it's Hubert. It's the guy that I grew up next to, was my best friend, and all you saw was just this thing walk by from the back, and you saw, and you go, I'll be damned. Even if you could name his name, you knew something, and you'd want to go grab the guy and look at him, and then you'd see. The point was, he was his personality. He was grown-up Hubert at the age of 12. And no matter what you do in your mind after that, you're still Hubert or Francis. Consider, I guess all we're going to get to what I was really trying to push, because it is worthwhile. There's a practical purpose to what I'm getting at about the philosophy of life. Everything you try to analyze about this kind of activity is a philosophy of life, but it runs absolutely counter-distinctive to everything that life tells you. Because how do you learn anything? Well, the first thing, if you're going to study anything, if you decide, I do want to study accounting, then you go and you find a school somewhere, either college, a night school, and what do you ask? You don't just walk in the first class, you say, where's Accounting 101? Because you know damn well you're not going in Air Conditioning 101. You want accounting. And you maybe walk in the class and you make sure you ask somebody, you ask the instructor, is this accounting? They go, yes. Maybe after the first class you've never been around accounting. When it's over, you may ask the guy, say, are you sure this is accounting? And he says, yes. And you go, okay. Because you want to know. You want a philosophy of life. You want something to guide you that, all right, I'll be here next week. I'll be here tomorrow night for accounting. This, to the same degree, back to my original comment, to the same degree you've got a philosophy of life, you're not conscious. Can you see what I'm getting at? To the same degree that to yourself, forget you and me or you and anybody else, inside your own head, to the same degree that you have to ask, well, am I doing this correctly? If I've actually found this, is this it? Is this, and you probably had some name before, is this actually modern day Sufism or Zen or something? Is this actually it? Don't forget the answer. To the same degree you ask that, you got a philosophy of life. And to the same degree you ask that, you cut down right that second, every second, any possibility of being more conscious. Or put in everyday language, you cut out every possibility of seeing anything new. And yet the mind, it sounds just the opposite. Because the mind will say, well, that's insanity. Because I got to know what I'm doing to learn anything new. I know. You think, well, I'll never get the dough moved over here from being non-accountant to an accountant. Or I could not even move it. Here I am, interested mystical seeker, and I want to get it more closer to where do you actually become one? I at least got to know. I know. No, you don't. Yeah, I know you do. I'm just being silly right here at the end. To the same degree, how about this? Since philosophy of life, that's a big term. God damn, that's philosophy of. I thought that's three. That's three damn words. How about thought? Like it. To the same degree you think, you're not conscious. Try that on the mind. And it's not a joke. It's not because in any way that you're lacking. There's nothing you can do with that. My concluding comments about that is why, let me point out, not to give you the blues or to upset you, but with ordinary people, and we're not ordinary people. And the more I do this, the less ordinary I get. We're not talking about me. You should be happy, though. How about this? The less time I got to fuck around with it. But it is the idea of why people go off and sit, and they're prepared to. Historically, thousands of years, nothing is new, that people like this today, maybe people you know, you may have had such plans, that you were prepared, if you could arrange things, to give up your whole ordinary life and to go off and find the right kind of monastery, right kind of mystical school somewhere, that very likely would have said, all we do is 10 hours a day we sit and we think this one word, or we do one thing up here. You go, okay, I just want to be under the right conditions. I want to be here where other people are doing it. I want to be where there's that kind of baraka, that kind of grace that may be passed down from some past mystical teacher, or just the force of all these people. I'm ready to do it. And they say, they may warn you if they're saying it all. They'll say, now you do understand, we're not giving you any guarantees. The man may say, I am the head of the monastery, and as far as I'm concerned, I have not reached Buddhahood. I am not through with my struggle. I am not enlightened. I will not say I am. And you go, okay. And he says, and I've been doing it 40 years. I won't tell you that. There have been people that walked in here that it happened in a week. But we've had people that's been here longer than me right over there. So the point is, they say it may take a lifetime. I'm just going to clean up the story for you. That may be true. It won't take a lifetime hanging around me. You'll lose it. One of us will lose interest. But what it's saying, what it's saying is this, is why I stand here and talk. It's not just to hear me talk, and it's obviously not to make me rich and famous. It's because it is so simple, it is so direct and in your face, that all I do is show up, and every night, or every time I do this, I make up a whole new set of stories, whole new parables, think up whole new terms, whole new diagrams, and it is all, as we say in the mystic business, the same fucking thing. Over and over and over. That I could put in a short sentence, but if I did, it's too fantastic, no one would believe it. So then you have to talk in allegorical terms, and you have to say, well, next time we'll pick up when I'll describe why people are fascinated with the ideas, with criminals, in fact, as heroes, and etc. And you think, well, that could be interesting. Yes, I can make it. If you're interested in such as this, I can make it interesting. But I'm just going to point out to you, it'll be the same thing I said tonight. But you put a different dress on it. That is a more active form of sitting indefinitely and meditating. It's like I'm doing it for you in a more active way, but rather than you just sit there, which, there's nothing wrong if you don't go do it. I sort of wouldn't try to stop anybody. But as you sit there and you're trying to do this one thing, you don't know what it is. That's why you have to have somebody tell you. You want a philosophy of life. They say, well, what we're trying to do is still the mind. If you were under a Buddhist context, they'd say what we're trying to do is reach Buddhahood, to still the carnal mind and be enlightened. You go, that's it. That's all I want. And they say, well, here's how we go about it. This is our interpretation. Our Grand Master, that was his interpretation of what Buddha said do. So you say, it's good enough for me. It may take you a lifetime and it may not work. All right, I could talk a lifetime. I have thus far. Yeah, up until now I have. I've talked about it. And I've had people listening to it ever since I've been talking about it. But I can't say it'll happen tomorrow. You cannot guarantee it with anybody. But what I can guarantee is if you can stand this and you ever do it, it's a lot faster than 30 or 40 years. But in a sense, I'm having to sit there studying the same thing, like this one word, or peanut butter, whatever I said. It's like this one word, or if you want the real way, I have to stand here knowing the secret of life, knowing what life's about, and knowing I can't tell you. And so I stand here, and instead of you having to move off and sit somewhere and try to sit there 8 or 10 hours a day and get arthritis and blisters on your ass, and plus get real bored, never know whether James Brown made yet another comeback, got his career revived again. You'll just be out of touch. You'll lose all that neat stuff. Never taste Jack Daniels again, for all I know. But rather than you doing that, it's like me, in an active way, sitting here doing this same boring thing. Now, I don't mean it bores me, but doing this one thing, except I know what it is, but I can't sit here every day and do it. If we did that, we'd just meet here, and I say, all right, we'll meet here every week or 5 days a week, and I'm not going to talk anymore. That was just an introduction. We will sit, I'll sit here, and then you'll sit there, and we'll all sit here, and we'll stare at the floor for an hour. And it might work. But see, rather than you do that, as I do it for you actively instead of passively, but I'm just pointing out to you, is I do the same thing as I sit here and I meditate for you. And when you participate, you meditate for you, but it's like every time it sounds like we're always talking about a new thing. I'll even preface it like tonight. I said, well, here's 4 or 5 ideas and stories I've written recently, and I'll approach them. I'll talk about them sort of from a mystical way, or I'll bring up politics or current movies or something, and I'll give kind of a, if I may say so, a sort of a mystical view of it. And you go, well, I like that. Now I'll show the allegory behind the allegory. I'll show the reality behind the allegory. It's the same fucking thing over and over and over and over. But what are you going to do? Because it's right in front of your eyes long before you met me. When I'm dead, it's still going to be in front of your eyes. I didn't produce it. I'm not responsible. It's just live. It's right there. But you got this hat on. And ever since you put that hat on, it changed everything. It made you able to think. And one of the first things humans thought was, God, I wish I knew what was going on. One last story I didn't throw in. It was one I wrote last night. If there's any chance you people who are really into the new crowd, if you could arrange it, I'm sure worth it, somebody would. I think you would, how about enjoy, extremely enjoy, because I've been thinking about you even at nights you're not here, going along certain lines. But of last nights and last Fridays, they're on tape here if anybody wanted to arrange for them to pull out. We got a TV here, don't we? Well, generally. I think, because I don't want to go back and try to repeat it, even if I could. Yeah, I could. Who would I impress? Me? I'd be the one. Could I repeat it word for word from last night? What if I could? Big deal. Jesus. Give me a degree in redundancy. I want to tell you one more story. Here it goes from last night. This will wrap up. There was a man who had an illness. It wasn't fatal. It didn't even incapacitate him. Nay, in fact, it helped facilitate his living of his everyday life. You got to admit, that's some kind of illness. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? It's an illness. But it doesn't hurt you. That's according to who you are. If you're ordinary, you think it does hurt you. Which is why all ordinary forms of anything always tell you what you should be doing. Religion, morality, the government, your mother. But notice, I never told you what you should be doing. I mean, if you ever ask me, should I be here? To me, that's enough proof that, how'd you last this long? What do you mean, should you be here? Well, tell me the truth. You must know, should I be here? I got better people write me. I've been reading your books, or I've seen some of your tapes. Should I move there from Norway just to be where you are? Should you? Should you? That's only ordinary life. The illness. That's why I called it an illness. A man had an illness. It wasn't fatal. Wasn't even incapacitating. Hardly. In fact, the illness is what facilitated him being able to live his everyday life. That be some kind of illness. You know what we're talking about. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. It's the illness. It's the illness. It's like a form of visual jaundice. You keep. I can almost say it's like myopia, some kind of cataracts. That's not cataracts. That's your mind. Yeah, but I can't see real good. I know it. It's not on your eyes. Well, not the one spelled E-Y-E-S. Sometimes I think I'm almost making it out, and then I'll try to analyze it. Well, see that? No. You just have to look. Or in our case, I'm looking for you and talking about it. Well, next time I'll pick up things I didn't talk about this time, and I know you'll. Well, I was going. At least try not to have a philosophy of life. Off the record, you might notice, not that it's ever the point, but how destined, such as this, assuming I'm running it sort of the way it's always been run, of why it is destined, I'll put it another way, why it has little chance of ever being widely popular. Or even me saying, well, if you want to keep it up with me dealing with you new people, you should bring in other people. And I'm sure by now some of you have brought in people or talked to some of your friends you thought was interested in the same thing, but you just go out and talk to somebody. Like guys you just sit around and smoke dope or drink coffee and talk about mystical things. And you say, well, I found this guy's pretty interesting. You want to come here? And they say, well, tell me something about it. If you had any wits about you and you've tried, you realize, well, I guess you got to come down and see. I'm not bragging on me. I'm saying if you listen the right way, and they say, well, just tell me something. If you tried, if it was somebody you actually know and like, and you thought, well, I don't want to lie to you, you'd have to say, I don't know what to tell you. Well, why'd you go? Well, come down. Well, tell me something. I'm not going to go to the trouble to take a shower and go down there for nothing. Just tell me something. And again, assuming it was one of your good old coffee-drinking, mystical talking buddies, and you'd say, no. There's going to be some reason you go. Just give me a word. Because I'm afraid you'd finally slip up. But if you really kept your wits about you, you go, no. You see how easy it is to advertise and promote this sort of thing. People say, well, tell me, should I move there? Why should I buy your books? Why should I listen to you? No hope. I mean, there's only one answer if I bothered to answer. Well, you shouldn't. I never said that. My God. If anybody connected with me said that, tell me and I'll slap them around. You think about it. From a certain kind of less run-of-the-mill view, what else in life would be worthwhile? Again, the mind would say just the opposite. Well, the only reason you should undertake anything or do something is because there's a purpose for it. Why go to school if you're not going to graduate? Why get married if you're not going to raise a family? Why get a job if you're not going to buy a new car or buy something to make you happier? Well, think about it. Everybody does that. The only thing that's worthwhile is to do something that there is no reason to do. Think about it. Even the mind. Now, it'll want to shut up about it and tell you, leave me alone. But even the mind has to admit, all right, that's got to be. It doesn't make any sense, but it's got to be true. That's the only thing actually worthwhile would be something that you don't need to do. Because you're going to do what you need to do. You're going to feed yourself. You're going to get laid. Assuming you still got hormones raging or running. You're going to sleep. You go, yeah. And you'll do whatever the mind says you have to do. You'll go to the movies you have to go. You'll distract the mind the way in which you have to. People will be bad-mouthing TV, and you go, yeah, I hate it too. And you go home, you sit there, and you go, well, oh, damn, you'll turn it on. It's just, the point is, your mind will do whatever you need to do. No one has, I want you to see this, no one has never made any effort in life. Only mystics, just to call them something. Only doing something like this is the only effort you ever make. And the mind will say, well, that's absolute insanity. You don't know the problems I have. Trying to juggle a wife and 2 girlfriends, trying to have 2 jobs, and everybody says, my mind, you don't know the stuff on my mind. That doesn't take effort. To do what's required takes no effort. To do otherwise is insane. You do what's required. Everyone does, even here. The only thing worthwhile is to see where that gets you, see where it gets everybody. That's the way it's supposed to be. The only thing worthwhile is to do something here that there's absolutely no reason for it. None. That's why you can't talk about it. If you talk about it, you think, oh, so that's the reason you do it. And then you have to say, nah, I just said that. It was just to reel you in before you close. You know, the hook was about to come out, and I knew you didn't want that. You go, oh, so that's the reason. You go, no. But then you got to do it yourself. There is no reason. Well, all right, I'm going to shut up. There is a reason. I'll go ahead and say it. It's a mystic's reason. And I've never told anybody this. I never tried to put words, but because it is so close to being a snotty little 5 or 6 year old, a mystic's reason, there's only one reason to do that. And that's because I want to. Can't you just see Zoroaster or Buddha going, oh, too bad. His father is saying, you could be king. You'll be king someday. You got a wife, why are you going out and do that? Well, just give me one reason. Because I want to. I'm assuming he's decent enough, didn't stick out his tongue. He just swallowed it, but that was his only answer. Which is no philosophy of life, you might know.